Hi, I'm John Hamlin, and I'm out today with Bianca Howard from our Solid Waste Management Division at Harris Lake County Park, where we're going to be demonstrating how to compost in your backyard. So out here at the park, we have a few examples of how you can compost, including with the Earth Machine style bins that the county sells during its annual compost bin sale. So before we get started, I have just a few quick questions to make sure I'm ready to learn how to compost. First of all, if I want to compost, how much time am I looking at?
Composting can take as long or as little as you want to put into it. If you do nothing but add materials to your bin and keep it moist, you could have compost ready in about a year. If you want it ready sooner, just put a little more time into it and make sure that you get out there at least once a month to turn it.
Okay, so that's great. My next concern is it going to smell bad?
Well, no, not as long as you follow a few basic rules. We'll talk about some things you do want to put in your bin, as well as a few things you definitely want to leave out.
Okay, so that sounds easy enough. So now that I've decided it's time to start composting and I've got my bin assembled, where should I put it?
Well, there are a few things to keep in mind before you decide to place your Earth Machine. First, you want your bin close enough to your house that you can remember to go out and put things in it. Ideally, you'd want it close to a water source, such as a hose, so you can keep your bin moist. You also want to avoid full sun if you can. Where we are today is great. The bin has some shade so it doesn't dry out too much.
Okay.
And finally, you want to avoid any kind of obstructions that could prevent your bin from getting air. The Earth Machines come with ventilation slats, so you want to be sure that you're not too close to bushes or trees that could block those.
Okay, so how do I get started adding material?
Well, I like to start with about a 2-inch layer of twigs on the bottom. That helps to aerate your bin a little bit. And then you want to start layering greens and browns.
Okay, so tell me what you mean by greens and browns.
Well, browns are things that have a lot of carbon. Those are things that tend to be kind of dry and woody. So think about sticks, dry leaves, twigs, shredded paper, sawdust, shredded paper in very small amounts. Those are all things you could put in your bin that are considered browns. Greens are things that are rich in nitrogen, and those tend to be a little bit more wet. So those are things like grass clippings in small amounts, fruit and vegetable peels, also things like tea bags and coffee grounds. So things that are kind of wet and mushy.
Okay, so I did a little bit of reading about this before today, and I saw something about a C to N ratio, and that sounded technical.
Well, composting is a science, but it's also an art. So that stands for carbon to nitrogen ratio. But when we talk to people starting composting, we like to think about just volume. So try to have twice as much brown material as you do green material. So one of the best things you can do for yourself when you get started is don't just put in fruit and vegetable scraps, but try to balance it out with twice as much of those brown things. Things like the straw, the twigs, the dry leaves.
Okay, so now you've told me what we want to put in the bin. Is there anything that I need to leave out?
Yes, and don't feel like you have to memorize this. If you buy an Earth Machine, you get this great handbook, which has a list of things to avoid. So you never have to memorize it. It has everything you need to get started with your bin. So some of the key things to avoid are meat and dairy products. They might be a part of your diet, but they do not belong in your compost bin. Those things would break down eventually, but they don't break down fast enough in a backyard bin. They also might attract rats to your yard, which is something you probably don't want. So in addition to avoiding meat and dairy products, you also don't want to put in any really greasy or oily foods. When it comes to plants, think carefully about what you're doing to your own yard. Avoid putting in plants that you've treated with pesticides, as well as any weeds that have already gone to seed.
Okay. So do I need to chop things up before I put them in?
It can be helpful. So you want to make sure materials are not more than 2 to 6 inches in diameter. I like to use tools I already have. For me, my head shears are a great tool. I like the long blades, but don't feel like you have to go out and buy something. If you have pruners or loppers on hand, just use those. And that way you can break down any really long limbs or any really fat branches.
Okay, so are there any other tools we could use?
There are 2 more things that can be really helpful. In between trips to my compost bin, I like to have a container to keep my food scraps in. This one's really nice because this pail has holes that are large enough to let air through, but they're too small for fruit flies or other insects to get in. So I use this to store my fruit and vegetable scraps, as well as tea bags and coffee grounds. So any kind of pail or container with a tight fitting lid can be really helpful for your scraps. The second tool that I find really helpful is a turner. This one is nice because it's designed to aerate the bin. It slides really easily into the narrow opening of an earth machine. If you don't want to buy a turner, you could use something like a pitchfork, but that's a little bit harder to get through the opening of the earth machine. And turning the bin, John, is something that is helpful if you want your compost to be ready faster. That helps to mix the contents, it mixes the wet and the dry parts together, and introduces oxygen so the microbes can do the work for you.
Okay, so I heard you mention fruit flies when we were talking about the kitchen. Are there any other kinds of creepy crawlies we should be looking out for?
You should, and a healthy compost bin will become its own ecosystem. You can avoid fruit flies by always covering up your scraps. I like to use this small digging tool when I'm putting scraps in my bin. I always dig down into the bin a little bit and cover them up. And having a healthy supply of dry leaves or straw, those browns we talked about earlier, helps to bury your food scraps so that it's hard for fruit flies to find them. But a healthy bin sits on the ground and it's open to the soil, so organisms can come up and help break down your compost. So in a healthy compost bin, you should expect to see earthworms, beetles, and roly-polies. Those are all good signs of decomposers working to break down your waste.
Okay, so we've got a whole ecosystem going on in there. Does it need any water from time to time?
It does. So in order for your compost to break down quickly, you want to keep it about as moist as a wrung out sponge. One easy way to do that is to add water when you're adding food scraps. You could fill up the pail the rest of the way, or keep a watering can nearby, or make sure your bin is within reach of your hose so you can add water when necessary, especially during our hot, humid summers.
Okay, so I think I've got the process down. How long is it going to take until I have some finished compost?
Well, if you did, absolutely nothing except adding food scraps and brown materials without ever turning it, it would take your compost about a year to be ready. If you turn it more frequently, and if you build a batch all at once, when I say build a batch, I mean fill up your bin all at the same time, your compost could be ready in as little as 3 to 4 months. So again, it really goes back to how much time you want to invest and how quickly you need that compost for your garden.
Okay, so how will I know when it's finished?
Well, finished compost looks a lot like soil. It's dark brown to black and it's crumbly. It should have a nice earthy smell. It should not stink. Most importantly, you shouldn't recognize what you put into it. You might see an apple core, but you shouldn't see a whole apple or entire bits of food.
Okay, and so then once I've got this finished compost, what do you use it for?
There are a lot of great ways to use compost in your garden, and your composting handbook will remind you of some of those. One of my favorite ways is to use it in a potting mix, where I mix it with other soils, but you could also spread a layer of it on top of your garden, or you could really dig it into your soil if you're starting a brand new bed from scratch.
Okay, and plants love this stuff?
They do, and it can help you save money by not having to water your plants as often. And it can also just add some healthy nutrients to your soil, and that's really what healthy plants need. It all starts with healthy soil.
Well, that sounds great, Bianca. Thank you for teaching us how to compost today, and I look forward to getting started myself and hopefully keeping some extra trash out of the Wake County landfill.